Kevin,
Russ.
Serge, and Russ.
Yeah.
Young guys, if we stay together, this league is ours.
It was only for like $4 million too. Summertime traded. Like a couple days before the first game. It was only for like $4 million too.
No offense to James Harden, but that's not true. If you go back to the day that the Thunder decided to trade away James Harden to the Houston Rockets, the reason for doing so was not the money. But let's back up a second. In a rare podcast interview for James Harden, he was talking about one of the biggest what-ifs in the history of the NBA. When in the fall of 2012, the Oklahoma City Thunder, just months removed from a finals appearance, broke up the trio of Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. And Harden says it was all about the money. That the Thunder broke up a trio of future MVPs, three iconic players of their generation, all under 25 years old, fresh off of a finals appearance to save a few $1 million. But that's not what happened at all. If you go back to 2012, one of the reasons that this was even an issue in the first place, that the Thunder were even considering breaking up this dynamic trio that they had, of course, was money. There was a intense contract negotiation between them and Harden. And the salary cap at the time was much different because the max contract that Harden could have signed for was 4 years, $60 million, and the Thunder were only offering him 4 years, $52 million. And ultimately, they were unwilling to increase their price to go all the way to the full max, and they traded Harden away to Houston, where he ultimately got the money that he was looking for from Oklahoma City. And for years, the reasoning behind the move has reportedly been, oh, they didn't want to spend a couple million extra bucks to keep this group together. But if you think about this for longer than 2 seconds and actually go back and look at it, this can't have been about the money. Okay, so if it wasn't about the money, then what was it about? Why did Oklahoma City get rid of James Harden? Well, reason number one, James Harden was bad in the 2012 finals. He just was. He was 22 years old, and there were other guys that weren't great in the series either. Honestly, nobody played well for Oklahoma City in that series, and even given some poor performances, they still had a chance in that series. It ended 4-1, but that was a much closer finals than anybody really remembers. It was LeBron's first title. The Heat came off the incredible disappointment of the 2011 finals when they lost to the Mavs, but that was absolutely a series, and Harden, among others, did not play very well, which was strange because Harden had actually been someone that had been giving teams a lot of trouble throughout the postseason. Most notoriously against San Antonio, that was a guy that they were really worried about. Harden was the guy that they actually had a lot of trouble with, even on a team that also, of course, included Durant and Westbrook. And had Harden played well in the 2012 finals, they probably would have had no issue whatsoever going all the way up to the full max and keeping Harden, but he didn't. And that was the last memory that they had of what James Harden was going to contribute to their team that also had two fantastic young up-and-coming players in Durant and Westbrook. And when they saw that performance, it gave them some pause, and they weren't willing to go all the way up to the $60 million max. But honestly, that's not even the biggest reason why this didn't happen of all three reasons I'm going to give you. But before we get to those other two, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, PrizePicks. And they've got some fantastic stuff going on this week, all kinds of really cool promotions. Of course, it's Thanksgiving, so you've got basketball, you've got football. And the first thing to know about is this free square on Thanksgiving. If Tyreek Hill gets one receiving yard on Thanksgiving, that is a free square for your selection. So go ahead and put that into your selection for this week. But what you can also do is look at some NBA stuff during the week leading up to Thursday. And if there's a couple of numbers that you really like, you can put more or less for each of them, add that to your selection. Then you get to Thanksgiving and you've got the free square already sitting there for you, in addition to some other promotions that PrizePicks normally does during the week as well. So if you've never done PrizePicks before, go ahead and click that link in the description. You can use code SPORTING and get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup, and just do that. Pick some NBA stuff during the week, look at these promotions, and then use that free square on Thanksgiving if Tyreek Hill gets a single yard. So again, take a look at that free square, look at promotions throughout the week on PrizePicks, and use code SPORTING. Click that link in the description for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. And thank you again to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. Okay, so back to the Harden stuff. When they traded away James Harden in the fall of 2012, a couple of games before the season started, which is not an ideal time to be making a trade for a team that just made the finals, they didn't have to make the deal then. James Harden was a restricted free agent the following offseason. He was under contract and would have continued to be under contract moving forward. If Oklahoma City wanted to just run back the entire team, the entire main pieces of the team that they just went to and fought pretty well in the 2012 finals with, they could have done that. The money did not prevent them from bringing back Harden and everybody else for at least one more season. The concern for them was the luxury tax beyond that, with having Serge Ibaka, with having Kendrick Perkins, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, and Harden and what that was going to mean for the luxury tax of their team. But that wasn't a concern in the fall of 2012 because the offseason had already happened. And even if you go throughout the season, maybe Harden isn't that great for you, you're disappointed, and a lot of the fears that you had from the 2012 finals get realized in terms of his fit alongside Russ and KD, even if that happens, you can still keep him the following offseason as a restricted free agent, sign him to whatever you want to, sign and trade him, or just move forward with him anyway. He's still absolutely an asset. So the fact that $4 million came between them and keeping James Harden in the offseason doesn't make any sense because they didn't have to do the deal then. And the other reason it couldn't have been about the money is that they had the money to pay him in two ways. One, they could have just given him the extension. They were willing to give him $52 million. They weren't so concerned about the luxury tax that they weren't willing to pay him at all. And also, they had the money in the sense of they were giving money to other guys. They gave Serge Ibaka a contract extension worth over $40 million. They had Kendrick Perkins on the roster who they could have amnestied using the amnesty clause back in the day that the NBA had to help teams get out of these bigger contracts. There were ways to find the $4 million to get James Harden to the full max if they wanted to pay him that and bring him back anyway with mostly the full team. But they kept using the money in other places. They prioritized keeping someone like Serge Ibaka on the team over bringing back someone like James Harden. Not having to do with money necessarily, they just thought that he was a better fit on the team. So the bottom line of all this that Harden is missing in this interview with his answer saying that it came down to $4 million was OKC could have kept James Harden if they wanted to. They had every choice, they had every opportunity to keep him in two different ways. One, either just for one more season and run back a team that had just made the finals, or to keep him long term if they move some money around. They had the chance to, and they chose not to. It wasn't that they couldn't come to an agreement on the contract. It wasn't that they didn't have the money. They chose not to have James Harden on the team. Okay, so why would that be the case? What we know now about James Harden is that he's an MVP caliber player, that he was fantastic in Houston and then went to Brooklyn and then Philly and then LA and all these different teams, and at every stop he's been an all-star or better. And immediately upon arriving to Houston, he became an all-star level player. So why did Oklahoma City not want to retain him if they had the opportunity to, and then they chose to get rid of him? Well, one, they liked the trade. They got this trade from Houston where they got assets and they got some contracts that were expiring. They got Kevin Martin, who at the time they saw as basically the same level of scorer as James Harden. And so they felt like having Ibaka, KD, and Russ as their core three, and then adding assets and flexibility by trading away Harden and not paying him the money was more beneficial to their team than keeping the trio of Harden, Russ, and KD together. They did not value James Harden so much that they were willing to, one, pay him, and two, not take this deal that Houston offered them. That's the bottom line of the James Harden situation. That's the historical inaccuracy of all of this. They had the money. They didn't have to trade him. They chose to. And obviously that was a massive miscalculation for Oklahoma City. They never end up winning a title, and had they kept Harden, chances are they would have had a very good chance to win a title prior to 2016 when Kevin Durant ultimately leaves to go to Golden State. But they just liked the trade. If Harden had been better in the 2012 finals, if he had accepted the $52 million contract offer, if they had amnestied Kendrick Perkins, if they had not given Serge Ibaka the money that they gave him, any of those things happen, I think James Harden stays in Oklahoma City. It wasn't just because of $4 million. It's because they didn't love the fit long-term of Harden, Russ, and KD. As unbelievably talented as that trio was, and they were still so young, and we saw what each of them grew into together and individually, they didn't like the fit. They felt like they had to pick a guy. They certainly weren't getting rid of KD. Russ was more of a focal point to the team in the first place, and Harden was just the odd man out. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about $4 million. Oklahoma City actively chose to trade away James Harden.